Hi, I'm Pastor Dan Burgess at Water of Life, and this is our second lesson on how to teach a Bible study for our CAP class, Congregation Assistant Program. Last time, on our last lesson, we looked at how to prepare to teach, and now we're going to look at actually teaching. So let's go ahead and get into this. So the first thing is, what is the teacher supposed to do? And before we get into this, I want you to take a look at in your workbooks on reading 1, and that's on pages 9 and 10 in your workbook. It is the why are methods important? Now, take a minute, pause the video, and read through Why Are Methods Important by Professor David Kuski, and then come back here. Okay, so now the role of the teacher changes somewhat from culture to culture, right? So, and it depends on every situation. Now, there's a couple things here. If the teacher is an expert and the students have a strong desire to learn, then the teacher can do a little bit more lecturing and expect the students to take notes and to stay interested on their own. But if the students are not so interested, and the teacher then is not going to be so successful at lecturing. So then you have to use other things like questions, pictures, group activities, and other such methods to keep students involved. When you're teaching the Bible, it's a little different as well. You see, we're not just trying to get information into brains, we're also trying to get gospel into hearts. And that is God's job. We are the delivery method, getting the word to people so God can work in their hearts. So we have to take that into consideration as we are teaching. So, a couple things to talk about here. I want you to take a minute and do exercise 5. So exercise 5 is, after reading why methods are important, put in your own words the 5 key items listed for a successful adult Bible study. Now, take a minute, pause the video, and put these 5 key points in your own words. Now, something to notice is that these were written for a white North American church. In what ways are they applicable or not to your situation, your congregation, your prospects? Here at Water of Life, we have a non-traditional church. We have people from all different cultures, and there are different languages that are spoken at home. And so we have modified the way we teach to reflect that. So please keep that in mind as you're going through this lesson today. A couple more things here. Communicating to the head. So we are logical creatures. All right, we are logical creatures. We like points that make sense. So the first job of the teacher is to present the material to the student so that the students can understand it. And that means that you have to be, and the material has to be, organized in a way that the students can follow logically and almost intuitively. We've already begun this. We started writing our objectives on our last lesson, and now you're going to do even more as you write a lesson plan. So here's what we're going to do. There are 3 basic types of Bible class subjects. All right, so the first is, it is a study of a book or books or a chapter or a passage. This is a lot of fun when you do these types of studies. When you get into, like, let's say, going through the book of James, and it's a lot of fun because you can really spend some time digging into it. Or when you do a chapter, and let's say you want to do the John chapter 10, and you're looking at Jesus is the good shepherd and the I am statement of Jesus, and it's just, you can really spend some time in it. Or if you really want to focus in on a passage, let's say you want to focus in on John 3:16, and how does that apply to our lives? But here, no matter what type of study, you have to begin by organizing. There are other studies that we typically do in our churches, are a study of biblical doctrine or teaching, or a Bible personality. So let's say you want to get into a study of end times. What does the Bible say is going to happen at the end of the world? Or let's say you want to get into faith. What is faith, and what does the Bible teach about faith? Or you want to do a Bible personality. We here recently did a study on King David, and then we followed that up with a study on King Solomon. It was a lot of fun to really get into the characters of the Bible and what they did, how they did it, and what they wrote. And then there's a study of some other topic, like a topical study, like let's say abortion, or you could do something on um, media. How does media impact us? And use scripture, pull scripture in to see what God says on this. All right. So no matter what type of subject, however, you really do need to have it well organized. So take a look at page 12 in your workbook. And there you're going to be shown an outline for almost any Bible lesson. And it begins with an introduction. Introduction is about 5 minutes long. And then the goal for that introduction is to get students interested and involved in the lesson, in the subject. So the teacher then announces the aim or the theme of that lesson. Now, we move on to our first main point, or our objective. We teach each objective using 3 parts: background, key verses, and application. Now, the first thing that you have to do in almost any study, whether it be a Bible chapter, a book, a topic, or a personality, you need to have background information. All right, we have to provide background needed to understand the lesson or the point and objective. So this might be, for example, historical or geographical information, especially for a Bible story. So this Sunday, I am preaching on Jesus going into Nazareth. It was his first recorded sermon that we have in Luke chapter 4. And the context, the historical background is rich here. I mean, why did they do the things they did when they came into the temple? And Jesus, why did he do the things he did? Why did he sit? Why did he stand? Right? So there's the cultural things. And then there's the geography. Right? At the end of the story, the people of Nazareth were ready to throw him off a cliff. So let's take a look at that geography and see what kind of place are we talking about? Are we talking about a 20-foot cliff or a 200-foot cliff? Is it a slope or is it a dead drop? All right, so there's all kinds of cool things we can talk about in the geography and the historical setting. Let me give you another example. Let's say I wanted to do a Bible study on the divided kingdom, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. So the background information that I'd really want to focus in on is, how did they get to be that way? It was a united kingdom under David and under Solomon, and then it split. So the background information would be what happened at the end of Solomon's life that caused Israel and Judah to have 2 separate kingdoms. And they never really were united after that. So another thing that you need to focus in on is the context of the Bible verse. So that's pretty easy. You want to read the verses around the topic or the verse you're looking at, but you want to do more than just like 5 verses around it. You want to read like the whole chapter. Sometimes you want to read the whole book. Let's say you're doing a study on Luke chapter 4 and Jesus preaching in Nazareth. Well, read from Luke 1 all the way through Luke 4, Luke 5 to give you an idea of how that story fits into the broader picture of what is Luke trying to say, what is God trying to say here in this section by placing it right there in the middle of Luke chapter 4. And then you really have to put any other information that's necessary to fully understand what the lesson is all about. You want your people to leave with a ton of knowledge. Okay? So, let's continue here. After giving on the background, we focus in on the key verse or verses that teach that particular point or objective. All right, so you can do this by asking particular verses or questions about the verse. You can do this by asking about words and their meaning and their context. And when the students understand what the verse is saying, it's important then and its importance, you can then move on to the application of this. And then you apply here what has been learned to the students in this point and their lives. Now, let's say each of these steps takes about 5 minutes. Then you have about 15 minutes to teach one main point. The same 3 steps are then repeated with point number 2 and then point number 3. And so in about 45 minutes, you have 3 points taught in your lesson. Take a look, if you want, on pages 35 and 36 of your workbook, and you'll see samples as to how this all comes together. So depending on the subject matter and the amount of time available, the teacher may do all the background for the objectives at the beginning. Like, let's say you have 3 main points, 3 objectives, and you can do all the background for all 3 points at the beginning, and then teach all the key verses in the middle for all the points, and then make the applications at the end. Sometimes that's not easy, and especially if the subject matter is a little deeper, and it can be very confusing. The lesson should end with application. You always want to have, how can I take this lesson home? What can I learn from this and put into my daily life? Because remember, we're not just teaching to the head, we're also teaching to the heart. We want God to work in people's hearts with the gospel, and then them to act on that knowledge and that gospel that is placed in their heart. We're going to study this a little bit more as we get into the next few lessons. So let's continue here. Exercise 6, I want you to take a minute and take the objectives that you wrote down on page 8 in exercise 4, come up with a theme and several parts, put them in logical order, and develop a lesson plan like that on pages 35 and 36. For each section, write a few ideas to show the background information that you need to provide. Choose key verses to develop each sub-point, and then write a brief application for each one. And when you have finished this, come up with an idea for an introduction. And then that's your basic lesson plan. Good stuff. So take a minute, pause the video, and go ahead with exercise 6. Now we're going to move on to using all the senses, interactive teaching. So it's very easy. I say a lot of times that I get paid to talk. I talk a lot. And it's very easy for me as a teacher and a pastor to fall into the lecture mode, and I do all the talking. So I do work very hard to make teaching more of a conversation. That's more of what I like to be in my style. All right, so it's more of a conversation because I'm going to learn something too. So using interactive teaching methods makes this so much easier, and it makes it easier for the students to learn stuff. So when this happens, when we use interactive teaching methods, students become learners instead of just listeners. When I'm just lecturing, they're just listeners, right? But when they are interacting with me, they become learners. So take a minute, read page 15, and the reading there is called Why Use Interactive Learning? And as you read it, I want you to answer a few questions. First of all, what is meant by interactive teaching? And then I want you to list in order the 3 most important reasons, in your opinion, why people learn better from interactive teaching. And then would you agree that with the statistics on the middle of page 15? Can you tell a story of your own experience that shows good or bad interactive teaching? And then read again point 4 on page 15. What is the writer assuming that a teacher really should never assume? So pause the video, take a few minutes, and do this and answer these questions after that reading. The paragraph in the middle of page 15 gives some interesting statistics about what students remember. And the bottom line is this: human beings have 5 senses, right? We have hearing, seeing, smelling, touching, and tasting. And it is through these 5 senses that information is passed to our brains. So the more of these senses that are being used in learning, the more the brain remembers. So we use pictures and videos and music, maybe have the class act out a story using props, All of these things can be helpful in involving the five senses of learning. So now what I want you to do is think of a way to involve all five senses in a Bible lesson about Jesus' birth. Think of a way to involve all five senses in a Bible lesson about Jesus' birth. And you can find that lesson in Luke chapter 2. So go ahead, pause the video, and take a few minutes to take care of exercise 7. That is all I have for you for this lesson for today. We will pick it up here next time. If you have any questions, please drop me a line. You can reach me at pastor@wateroflifelasvegas.org. God bless your study, and God bless your day.